Tell me when. All right, so we're going to just have a brief discussion to go over some of the main issues that some of you are working on, some of you are maybe not working on, but I think it'll be helpful to a lot of our undergraduate students to get some of this under their belt, at least start thinking about some of the issues. Some of this we already went over, discussing this whole notion of, so what's the deal? So oftentimes when people think about mental health, they tend to think about simply either genetic or physiological factors that influence people's mental health. So we often think of, how many of you ever saw like One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest? Right?
I haven't seen it.
What?
I haven't seen it, but I've heard about it.
Oh my God, you can't die without seeing One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Great film about, huh?
So I'll put it on the list.
Oh, it's a great movie. It's really sad. Spoiler alert, no. But it's a great movie. But actually that movie has a lot more of a social context to it because it deals a lot with stigma. But a lot of times people think of mental illness primarily along the lines of genetic factors that might predispose people to have mental illness. And what we're trying to do in this class and in much of medical sociology, in much of public health, is to think of the societal context. So now we're starting to learn a lot more about genetics, we're starting to learn more about physiology. We have graduate students working on data sets that include some of these physiological markers because we're learning a lot more how it is that the social context that you live in can not only influence your behaviors per se, but then consequently can also influence these genetic factors. So we're learning a lot more about the fact that it's both genes and environment that work together to shape mental health outcomes. The other thing that we talked about last time, when you think about those issues, this book is largely structured around this notion of the unwell and the unfair society. For those of you that have taken theory, that should remind you, what should that remind you of? What social theorists should that get you thinking about? An unwell and an unfair society. Society being sick. It's a very Durkheimian model, right? It's a very I think you're right. I mean, to the extent that for Karl Marx, society was repressive, but he wouldn't have so much used like words like sick, where for Durkheim, literally society can be sick, right? Society is like an organism. And so part of the argument here is that if society shapes and influences mental health in a society that is unwell, that's going to play itself out more. What we didn't talk about is specifically the types of things that might make society unwell. Any ideas in terms of our society, our group of people that live in our society, if we have imbalances in mental health, what about an unwell society might lead to these negative mental health outcomes? What specifically? What kind of things? Any ideas?
Industrial pollution?
Why not, right? So we might think about, so the answer in the back, and I know the undergraduate students, I'll just reiterate what is being said by some of the students, graduate students in the room. You just said
Industrial pollution?
Industrial pollution, environmental degradation. We know that in the United States, certain groups of people, frankly, live closer to this kind of environmental waste.
Flint, Michigan.
Like, yeah, the big story in Flint, Michigan, where it's been discovered recently all of the contaminated water in Flint, Michigan that people were drinking. Well, contaminated water, I don't know the specifics of that case, but we would suspect that contaminated water is going to affect all kinds of physiological markers, which may in turn influence your mental health markers. If people are sick physically, that might roll over to influence their mental health. Because when we're sick, let's face it, when we're sick, one of the first things that happens to all of us when we're sick is how do we feel? Huh? Louder?
Lousy.
You feel like shit, right? And you know, to be technical, we might say that you feel depressed, right? So can you imagine feeling chronically ill because you're exposed to toxic waste or industrial waste on a regular basis? So an unwell society cannot manage, right, that type of social factor that influences people's health. And then that's associated with an unfair society where the ability to tap into resources that makes us better is unequally distributed, right? So the things that can make us healthy, the things that can make us better, are simply not available for certain groups of people. They're more available to some, less available to others. That characteristic of being an unfair society, we should then expect to influence not only health, physical health, but also mental health outcomes. So what do you think is one of the big issues on the table lately that is associated with making us a more fair society in terms of healthcare?
Currently?
Yeah. Currently, over the last, we've been dealing with it.
Affordable Care Act.
Yeah, so President Obama, and I'm not here to say whether it's a good thing or a bad thing. Empirically, the fact of the matter is, we probably have no idea what the long-term effect of the Affordable Care Act is going to be. What we do know is it is an attempt, right? It is an attempt to make us a more fair society. Because the idea is, how do Americans, before the Affordable Care Act, how do Americans get their health care? What's the primary mechanism for us to get health? Through your job, right? Through your employer. So the primary mechanism to get your health care was through your employer. The system of providing health care in the United States has historically been, in more recent times, has been a market-based model. We buy and sell and trade health care. That's what we do. Now, if you're very poor, whoa, what was that?
Man, that scared the shit out of me.
What was it?